I am Monique Burns, and I am going to tell you a story about something that only happens in Detroit, like only in Detroit, in real estate, and in the profession that my husband and I have. So normally, my husband and I, we buy houses in Detroit, we renovate them, we sell them to investors all over the country and all over the world. And lately it's been harder to find the houses to buy for cheap enough because, as everyone knows, the prices are going up. And so I decided I'm just going to send out letters to tired landlords and see if I can get them to sell me their house. And so I sent out a whole bunch of letters, and I'm very surprised at how many calls that I have gotten. And I'm surprised and I'm happy. So I got one of my more interesting calls, and it was this lovely lady. I'm going to call her Nancy. And Nancy called and she said, well, I have this house. And I said, okay, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms? So it sounded like your typical Detroit, it's my dog, your typical Detroit bungalow. And it sounded nice. And she said, but the kitchen, it needs some work. You know, it's kind of a granny kitchen. And I said, oh, you know, why do you want to sell it? Well, she said, there's a squatter in there. And I said, oh, so are we going to be able to, get in to see it? It's hard to buy a house when you can't get in to even see it. And she said, yes, because he is the nicest guy.
Say what?
And I'm thinking, so he just took over your house and he's the nicest guy. This is really confusing. She said, he's very pleasant. And I have been sending people over there who have been wanting to give me offers on my house. And he's been very cordial and has let everyone in. I said, okay, great. So in the conversation, I asked her what's going on with the water. And she said, well, it's in the tenant's name. Detroit is cool. With water, this is one thing I gotta say, Detroit does very well. The water is attached to the tenant, not the owner. So when the tenant moves out, the water bill follows the tenant. And she said, he's actually renting out his house and then living in my house. And so then I got into the question of, okay, so now if we got this house, how did he end up in there? Because if he was given permission by anyone, he's not technically a squatter. I had just heard this thing in Detroit, exactly how this works. I was on some Zoom thing about it. And if anyone said, oh yeah, hey, you could go live in the house, then you have to go through civil court. But if it was an actual breaking and entering, then the police will come and remove them. So I'm like, okay, this doesn't make sense to me. And she said, I almost rented to him, but my lawyer said that I shouldn't. Whatever. So my husband goes to the house, and he said that they had their gas stove on and it was open, which meant that they were using the gas stove to heat the house. And the woman had told me that when I asked her about the gas and electric, and she said, well, they did try to get in their name, but there's a block on it. And that tells me this utilities are probably stolen. People will, in Detroit, they'll wire it such so that they're still getting power to their house. And she said there's a new furnace and hot water heater, though. So he's probably getting heat, but my husband sees that he's getting the heat from his stove. So my husband goes down to the basement, and it needs a new furnace. So I don't know why she thought there was a new furnace in there. Probably somebody stole it, and this guy found a used one and put it in, or it doesn't work, or who knows. Furnaces get stolen. The minute a house goes empty, the furnace gets stolen. It can be stolen in broad daylight. And it's not like, it's usually like a neighbor kid, we think, that sees it. And they'll just come right in and take the furnace, and the police are so busy, it's really not their priority in Detroit to stop these people walking down the street with a furnace. And same with a hot water heater. Well, there's a hot water heater there, and my husband said, but the thing is, the hot water heater had two issues with it. One, it's gushing water. So there's a really bad water bill going on there, like gallons of water. And Detroit, although they're great, they attach it to the tenant. You cannot fight with Detroit about a water bill. You cannot, you can try. We've tried. We've appealed a house that they said there were like 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools of water being gushing through our house every day in this completely dry house. It wasn't even scientifically possible. My husband brought in proof, like the faucets only can go out this much, and where do you think this water is? Because it's not happening in this house. And they said, oh, thank you, sir, for coming in. Yeah, that makes sense. And then they sent us this denied thing, and we got stuck with the water bill. The second thing, and I'm not the maintenance guy. I'm probably describing this wrong. But the pipes connecting it. There's carbon monoxide that can leak if there's leaks in the pipes. And my husband saw this thing just leaking, holes all over the pipes. And he's like, oh my gosh, these people could die of carbon monoxide poisoning. It is in their basement. This is horrible. So he went out to his truck and he got the tape and he taped it shut to save the squatters. And this is why I love my husband. He does stuff like that. He said, well, how would I have lived with myself if I didn't? That is true. But I would I don't know. I thought that was awfully nice. Nancy had told me in that first conversation that she was offered, I think it was $35,900 for the house. And in my conversation with my husband, I said, well, she's already had an offer of that much and she was hoping we could beat it. And he said, did she really? I kind of doubt it. And I said, oh, yeah, that is possible. I mean, this is sales. So when I called her back, I said, listen, Nancy, the first thing I want to say is whoever gave you that offer, you should take it and run. And she was not expecting me to say that. And she said, well, why is that? And I explained to her that it needs a new furnace and it needs a hot water heater. We know what houses need to pass the city certification, and that one will not pass. The basement needs to be scraped and painted. The kitchen needs to be updated. The interior needs to be painted. There's a whole big hot mess going on with the garage. That's going to be the biggest expense right there. And she said, well, but they're new hot water heater and furnace. I'm like, what am I going to tell you? This is what he said. And I said, and by the way, he taped it so that the people there wouldn't die of carbon monoxide poisoning. And she said, well, I don't know what to do. And I said, well, I told you got to take that offer and run. And she said, well, but the thing is, the person that offered me that, they kind of disappeared on me. I don't know where they went. I said, well, you better find them because that's a good deal. I mean, we just know way too much. And she said, well, can you at least, I offered 25. She said, can you at least go up to 35? I said, no, that's not going to work. We need money to be able to renovate it and to even sell it and not be in the volunteer business. And she hemmed and hawed. She said, well, maybe I'll just rent it to the guy that's already there. I thought, wow. I don't know. I said, okay, well, let me know what you did. And I told her about the water thing. So she's going to call the water department, make sure it's really not in her name. Hopefully the water has been diverted, just like the power has. If it's been diverted, hopefully there's no reporting of the water gushing through the house. And hopefully nobody ends up with a bill. So I called my husband. I said, listen to what happened. And he's like, oh, well, you only know part of the story. I'm like, part of it? What else could happen at that house? He said, well, when he was taping it, he heard this little squeaking noise. He said it almost sounded like rats. And I'm like, oh, gosh, that's awful. And he said, no, it wasn't that. But, the guy that let me in, who was probably the squatter's adult son or young adult son, he was kind of like macho when he let my husband in. Like, who do you think you are? You're not messing with us kind of thing, Came on kind of strong. But he was watching my husband in the basement. And my husband's like, what is that sound? He's like, And he goes over and there's no electricity in the basement. My husband had to use his camera or the light on his phone. He looks over and there's this tiny little dog kennel and there was a pit bull in it, emaciated pit bull, and underneath her were 7 puppies on this cold basement floor. Like puppies, my husband said, were like the size of a potato. And one of them wasn't moving. And the guy's like, yeah, the bitch killed one of her dogs. And my husband's like, is the dog still warm? And he's like, yeah, it's warm. And my husband, Pat said, well, you know what you need to do? And the kid's like, no, what do you mean? You got to breathe into it. You got to blow into the puppy's mouth and get it alive. And so the kid got into it and he started blowing into the puppy's mouth and he went upstairs with it and the puppy came back to life. And so I love my husband. He did a good deed that day. I'm overwhelmed. I think it's nice that my husband did that. But these are these things, you don't know what to expect in Detroit. And I don't know what this woman's going to do. I don't know if she's going to, my husband said, she'll be calling back saying take the 25. But I don't know, strange thing.